I do believe that litigants in U.S. courts, and especially the Supreme Court, deserve to know if their judges' households are receiving six-figure payments from the law firms. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. He is the author of The Scheme: How the Right Wing Used Dark Money to Capture the Supreme Court. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good to be with you.
Three strikes and I'm up, okay? Three strikes and I don't know how to talk about this anymore. I mean, each one of these was the most shocking scandal you could possibly have suggested to me about the Supreme Court 5 years ago. This John Roberts thing is the most shocking thing I would have heard about the Supreme Court in my adult life, were it not for these two preceding cases. And they got very busy doing this very weird and shoddy, worse than shoddy investigation of the leak, which we've discussed, but no curiosity about the Supreme Court and the chief have no curiosity about these situations.
The through line through all of this that I see, Lawrence, is that if there are ethics questions about Supreme Court justices, there is no process for having that considered. The telling thing about this story is that the complaint by Mrs. Roberts' former colleague wasn't delivered to the Supreme Court. The reporting indicates that it was mailed, spattered around Congress, because there is no inbox at the Supreme Court where somebody with a concern about ethics can go and drop off a complaint. And even if they had that inbox, there's nobody emptying the inbox. There's nobody to conduct an investigation into the allegations. There's nobody to reach a conclusion based on the law and the ethics code. And there's no resolution and report at the end. In my line of work, you can go to the Senate Ethics Committee to have them investigate an ethics complaint about me. In the executive branch, you can go to the Inspector General or to the Attorney General, and they can look into our complaints about somebody's ethics. And in the lower courts, you can go to the chief judge of the court and say, I've got this ethics thing, and they look into it. In fact, there were a whole raft of ethics investigations pending against Brett Kavanaugh when he moved up to the Supreme Court, and they all vanished because there's no process at the Supreme Court. And they have to fix that.
And not to mention, all of the lawyers out there in America, every single one of them, you can go to the local bar association and say, here's what he did to me. Here's what this, and they say, here's the form, fill it out, we will look into it. Rudy Giuliani has found out that there are forms to be filled out at bar associations, which is why he's on his way to disbarment in 2 jurisdictions. So John Roberts, they call it the Roberts Court. There is, the chief gets the court in his name in that sense. And they've always, it seemed to me, had a sense about what that meant and what they didn't want it to mean. The Roberts Court is the only one of my lifetime that there have been these kinds of accusations surface, and he does nothing about it.
Yeah. There's no process by which anybody does anything about it. The one little adventure that they made into a investigative process was into the Alito draft opinion leak. And I think the reason that they did that was because they had the assumption that this was going to be some clerk, and probably some liberal clerk. And in fact, in there, you described that investigation very well. It was pretty much a botched, if not outright phony investigation. They lead with, even though they couldn't find an individual to accuse, they lead with the imputation of what the individual's motive was, and it just happened to be a motive that focused the blame on the liberal chambers of the court. So clearly they went into that thinking they were going to tag some liberal clerk, and when it got a little bit hairier, when it became apparent that there was actually a pretty strong motive from the conservative justices to backstop this decision by pinning it down so everybody could see it, nobody could go get squishy on it, that's when the investigation went awry, and there hasn't been one since.
What is the chief empowered to do right now as chief, looking at this situation, could he say, okay, I'm going to open up a complaint department here. I'm going to, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me it would be one of those areas where there's no guidance, which is what is that an opportunity where a chief could actually seize the absence of guidance to create something?
Yes. The chief is also the chairman of the judicial conference, either directly or through the judicial conference. He could say, this person is delegated to receive any ethics complaints. If they look serious, then they're going to be referred to this group of people to do a basic investigation of the facts. And then we're going to call, let's say, the chief judges of the 11 Circuit Courts of Appeal into a panel, and they will make a decision about whether there's been an ethics violation or not. They can't bind us, but the opinion of 11 Circuit Court chief judges would certainly set a hard mark that the Supreme Court would be almost obliged to follow, and it would put a big, big check and a deterrent on the misbehavior at the court that they now know there is no method for investigating.
So, yeah, and so they could conceivably come out with a report saying, in a given instance, we believe Justice Thomas should have recused himself in this instance.
Correct.
Had he been a member of this court, we would have required him to recuse himself. And as you say, that wouldn't force him to recuse himself the next time, but there would be a public demonstration of this is what the standards are, and then it would be up to Thomas whether he wanted to continue to violate them.
Correct.
Well, we are waiting.
We are waiting.
Sounds like a perfectly reasonable thing.
The pressure is mounting, and I think the pressure is mounting among the rest of the federal judiciary because they have to live under rules and they have to follow procedures, and I think they're getting a little bit annoyed that the court's behavior is consistently, repeatedly out of bounds that they have to respect.
There are 6 Republican-appointed members of the Supreme Court. 3 of them are now in this suspicion box as of tonight. 3. I thought I couldn't be surprised about this. I was surprised about this today. Senator, thank you very much for joining us once again.
Good to be with you always,
really
Lawrence.
appreciate it. Thank you.